Welcome, Kelly, to the Happier at Work podcast. I'm delighted to have you as my guest today. Would you like to introduce yourself to listeners?
Sure. I'm Kel Hartman. I'm the Chief People Officer at Flywire. If you can't detect, I'm an Aussie living in London, although at the moment I'm actually in the Greek islands. So I think during lockdown I decided to escape and have been working intermittently through London, Turkey, Italy and Greece. I've been in this role at Flywire for almost 3 years now. So and prior to that, I worked as another CPO in another company. So, my history is very, it's not unique HR, as we say, career path. I actually, at university, I studied psychology. And while I was in the I was a very curious person, still am, and I was always asking questions in the career office. So what happened was, I've always wanted to be a clinical psychologist, and then all these big companies were coming in for their grad programs, and I was like, wow, you get to work in like America and all these places. And I would always be in the career office asking questions, and they said, Kelly, do you want to do a 2-week stint for an airline looking at their cultural engagement surveys? And I said, sure. And they said, you need to have a really strong statistical analysis background. And I was not good at stats. I was good at all the counseling and everything else. Stats was my poor. Wasn't great at that. So I got a tutor to help me. And basically I did a 2-week stint at a big airline in Australia, and that just extended. And I went on and did this like 50-page report for the head of sales and marketing for this airline. And what happened was he couldn't believe, all my recommendations. I was just but I was a uni student at the time. And my recommendations was to actually validate the data by speaking to their sales agent. So he flew me around Australia first class, and I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. I remember I went to see Miss Saigon in Sydney, and they paid for my hotel, and then they wanted me to do a placement there. So anyway, they ended up paying me to trips to Bali with my friends and family. Nice. Because it was a placement. I couldn't get paid. And I actually then went on and what did I do then? And then I did, help with the training for their stewardesses and things like that. So I was like involved with the head of training and things like that. And it was only like 5 years ago that head of sales and marketing contacted me on LinkedIn. And he's like, you're like the best consultant I ever had. And I said, it's because I was for free. I still have those relationships. So that was really the beginning of my career. And from then again, it was a funny story. I was going through all the graduate program interview process, and BHP Billiton had a huge, graduate training program that you actually had to go away the weekend and do all, like, they see how that you work in team dynamics, and they give you projects and you meet all the executives. And I was in the lift, and I was just chatting to this older man at the time. I was young then, 24, much younger than I am now. And, I was joking with him, and I walked into my interview room, and he was like the head of HR for the whole company. And I didn't get accepted into the graduate program, and he rang me and he said, I've got another job for you. And they put me as like the head of like career development for the steel workers in one of the plants. And again, within 5 months, they gave me a and I set up the whole HR function for the service centers. So I didn't go up the ranks. I created a HR function when I was like 26 by myself. Wow. But then I had a really tough time there because my boss, he made a pass at me at his birthday. And like when I'm 24 and, that was a pretty horrible time. I had no one to talk to. And so I quit my job, and within 48 hours, I had a visa, or it was 2 weeks, but 48 hours I quit. And then, because I had no HR to talk to at the time. And then I went to go and live in Canada for a year.
Oh, wow.
So I lived in Canada for a year, came back. And when I came back to Australia, like people were all the recruiters wanted me to come work for them. And then I had an amazing woman, French woman, Brigitte. And she said, Kelly, why don't you just come work for me instead of working in a bar or something like that? And when a job comes up, or I'll help you find a job, you can do that. And so from there, I worked for a big banking because I didn't have bank. I didn't have financial services in my, remit or experience. And so I worked there for 5 years, lots of global roles, but I realized then I didn't really like HR at the time. I
Okay.
didn't think they cared for people. I didn't think they put people first. It was very much about control, processes, policies. So a
Yes.
lot of the CIOs or CIOs in technology I was working, they'd all want me in their business. So basically they didn't like their HR person. So I did their quasi HR in the business. So it was pretty amazing because I had the freedom there. I did a lot of roles on engagement and culture and things like that, and I didn't have to deal with all the HR stuff that not all of us like dealing with.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then I was tired of that, and I remember a new CIO came in, and I met her down at the coffee shop, and I was like, "Hey, I'm Kelly. I'm in your team. I'm actually going for an interview." It was for the Lion King to look after all the actors. It was so
Wow.
fun. It was so random, and within 24 hours she had a meeting set up and she created a whole role for me that I loved. And then there was an opportunity. The bank sponsored a big charity at the time called, and you might know it. He's an Jimmy Stein, so it was called the Reach Foundation. He was a Gaelic footballer, very famous footballer in Australia, a very incredible man. And there was a secondment to go and work for them for a year. I did all the groundwork before, and there was thousands of applications, and I was successful in that. And so the bank paid me to work for another organization helping young people live their dreams.
Wow.
And so I did that for 3 years of my life. Like, so they extended it,
Yeah.
and it was an amazing opportunity. I set up an NGO, helped set up an NGO in West Africa. I led the corporate trip over there, and an executive from Deutsche Bank said, "You're coming to work for me." And I said, "I'm not working for a Deutsche Bank. I'm not working for an investment bank, and I'm definitely not going to London." And now I've been there nearly 12 years.
Wow.
and started getting into the startup. So yeah, so my career, I think, one piece of advice is like, be honest, be bold, be who you are. Like, although sometimes it can be very difficult. I think I write a lot about that. Like sometimes being who you are and being vocal can be difficult. Not everyone likes the truth. Not everyone wants that. But if your intent is good and your intent is always to look out for people and you care, then I think it's a wonderful thing. But I've always had a philosophy in HR. It's, I think a lot of people used to say, "Kelly, I can't believe you're in HR. You actually care for people." And I think that's stung true for me. And I think the world is changing. There's a lot of people, that I meet now that really care for HR and really care for equality and equity and things like that. But I think that there was a time where there weren't many HR people that I looked up to that really did care for people.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, there's a few things that really stand out with what you're saying, like, saying, "I don't want to do this." And I think it's as important to know what you don't want as what it is that you do want. And it really shines through. Like if you're saying, this is definitely what I don't want, it shows what you do stand for. And the caring element definitely comes through. I loved what you said at the start about having this curious mindset. So being curious, asking questions, and being free to be yourself. I think that's kind of core to my philosophy in business, is being your authentic self, but finding that environment where it's safe to be yourself, where you can be yourself, but you can still thrive by being yourself, and you can be happy at work, and you can stay in that organization.
Yeah, agreed. And I feel, and that is difficult to find sometimes to do that. And I think even through school and other areas, when I think about stuff, and I posted something on LinkedIn today, I got trained by Brene Brown for Dare to Lead. So I was very lucky.
Wow.
And a lot of her stuff rings true to me. And a lot of people said, "Kelly, you've been doing that stuff for years without Brene." And I think I have. And I think one thing that really ran true is when I'm emotional or I'm a bit anxious or I'm not feeling good, that's because I'm not around the people that bring out the best in me. That's because I'm not really myself. And so when I'm connected to people, and I say it like, I'm traveling at the moment, as I said, I'm in Greece, I'm working from Greece, and I'm never ever lonely. And I've had the most amazing connections all the time. And I'm my complete self because I can be. And it's, I think you need to create environments which are free of judgment, and I think people judge for little things. Like, I get judged, people get judged by what you post on LinkedIn or about what you say, and rather than just being kind. And I think the pandemic more than anything has taught me like kindness, generosity, like just let people be who they are and give them encouragement and support. And I think I'm very lucky because I've come from a beautiful family that gave me that, and that led, you know, I'm always like, why am I like this? You know, why am I, because they're like in Australia, like they've been married 50 years. They're like quite traditional, but also very caring and loving. But and people say, don't you miss that? And I'm like, no, because it's with me wherever I go. So I get that confidence from them. And I think as I get older, I'm even more so very vocal and know exactly what I want. And that means sometimes, you know, I think Brene says it well, like choose courage over comfort any day. And there's been times where I've been out of work for 8 months, and it's not because there hasn't been jobs, there has been, but I was very clear on what type of company, who I want to work for, what location I want to work for. And I think that the great things, you know, will definitely come. I know someone. There's an alarm in the background. I'm sorry, but I think sometimes, you've got to be very clear on what you want, and I know that's a privilege. That's what I was going to say. Like someone says, Kelly, you're very privileged that you cannot work for 8 months.
Yeah.
And that is very true. So I'm not saying that anyone can do that, but there are times where, like when I got back from overseas and I said, you know, I work for a recruitment company. When I got to Canada, I worked in reception. When I was younger, I worked 3 jobs, McDonald's and Country Road, which was like a Gap, and, you know, and a grocery store. Like I will do anything too, you know, and I'm never afraid to get my hands dirty. But I do recognize that it is a privilege when I say, hey, I didn't work for 8 months, because not everyone can do that. They've got kids and mortgages and things like that.
Yeah. No, it is definitely a privilege, but it's equally, I think it's important for people to recognize not to just, I suppose, compromise on their values and take the first thing that comes up. And I know I've done that in the past in my career, where I felt the sense of desperation where I probably could have afforded to not work for a little while, but I took something because I sort of felt I should. You know, and I think oftentimes people think that they don't have another option, that there isn't anything else out there. But if they took the time to look, they might find something, or they might work somewhere else that is a bit more fulfilling, or a bit less against their values, while they look for something that is a bit more in tune with their values.
Yeah, and mine has to be in tune with my values, because if it's out of whack, and it's similar to relationships or friendships, like I know that, you know, there's people in my life that are actually, they don't align to my values. And every time I shed something, like all this amazing stuff comes twofold, right? You know, you look for your tribe, and they're everywhere. You know, I'm constantly connecting with people, or, you know, even at work, or opportunities and things like that, but I will never compromise on my values. And I'm always very honest in that. But that doesn't make my life easy either. Like, you know, it makes it sometimes a bit more difficult, because, you know, I'm actually a really sensitive person, and people don't know that, because I come across very confident, which I am. I'm sure of myself, but I'm also very sensitive. So I feel like I'm a target a lot of the time, because I am a bit different. You know, I don't fit the norm of what others expect. So it is a very interesting, but I'd rather be like that and be myself and be authentic than not.
Yeah, no, that's a great thing to be, and to have the courage, like you say, to be able to do that. One thing that was interesting that you said was about surrounding yourself. So having this environment where you can work your best, or you can be your best self, and you can deliver your most effective work. Do you have any thoughts on how, if someone was trying to do that now for themselves, how they might go about doing that?
Sure. I think one of the things I've really learned is that you aren't going to connect with everyone in your workplace. I don't believe. Like, you know, you're not going to be liked by everyone. And I think I tried so hard in the past to be liked, you know, by people, and to get approval. And what I do now is I eliminate or reduce the amount of, like, I have to work with everyone, you know, in my role, you know, over the years, you work across the organization, but there are some people that actually I don't really respect, and I might not like as much, and they probably don't like me. And I minimize the amount of time I spend with them. You know, when someone crosses me, or I hear that someone backstabs me, or talks poorly about me and I'm quite shocked, I think, I've had experiences like that. I minimize the time I am with them, and then I'm happier. So I spend more time with people that I connect with. Of course, it's hard because you spread your love everywhere and there's lots of people. And then I it's been amazing during the pandemic. Like every day I choose, 5-10 random Flymates that I speak to, or people outside, and like yourself, like I'm connecting with people all the time, and I never say no to someone. That always says, can you mentor me, can you have a chat? And if it's not purely sales, then I'm happy to chat to someone, happy to chat. And you just realize that you keep meeting incredible people. So I think my one thing is, like, for sure you have to work with some people that are not always kind or nice. Like, I either call it up and explain, hey, this is the impact you have when you say or do this, but then I minimize my time that I'm spent with them, and then I'm much happier. And I realize when I'm very emotional, I'm not happy because there's people that are undermining me or doing things. I minimize the time, and I never used to do that. I used to keep trying and trying for their approval. I don't do that anymore. There's no point. So
that's
I actually don't, because I actually don't respect them either. So why am I trying to get someone to like me when I don't really like them? And then now I've just got a lot of love around. Like, I've got amazing people. I call it love, like people laugh, but there's a lot of love in my organization. There's a lot of amazing people that I like to speak to, outside work, inside work. And this isn't just, with this organization, this is with any, it's just a learning. Like, you take the learnings with you. So you're always learning from your past, and hey, what went wrong there? What could have I done differently? So I also look at myself too. Like, I'm far from perfect,
Well, that's it, and that's what we can do. But I think there's some great kind of practical wisdom within what you've just said there. I want to touch on what you spoke about kind of traditional HR being a bit more process, policy driven, and this, oh, you haven't followed the guidelines here, therefore XYZ, rather than a caring approach. And if we are to change the world of work, how can HR take those steps? So if there's someone who works in HR who's listening today, what kind of steps can they take to start to make that transformation?
Yeah. Well, I think that, you still need process and structure. So I'm not going to say that because, people kill me if I say that. You do need some process and structure. And as you grow and as we scale, we need more of that. But you've got to take a caring approach. Like, you can have a combination. Like, there's no black and white, and I think you've got to realize that. So you've got to put people first and understand where they're coming through. And you actually need to listen and understand, understand their needs. You have to have empathy. You have to really listen, and you've got to want. If you don't really care for people, I don't know if you should be in HR, to be honest. Like, that's the honest truth.
Change role now.
Change role. Like, if you don't want to be in HR, if you're not looking out for the best interests of someone and you don't really care, I don't know if you should be in HR. Like, and I actually need leaders. Like, the reason I joined Flywire was because Masara, our CEO, he so cares for people, and you can feel it and you can see it, and he wanted someone to care. And I think that is really important. Like, I've worked for CEOs who don't really care, and you're coaching them and you're pushing stuff sometimes, and it's like, it's a big effort. When you've got someone leading the charge with you, it's completely different.
Yeah. So do you reckon then it oftentimes comes from the top down? So it's like the creation of this caring environment starts at the top.
The caring environment starts at the top. It can't be led by HR. And that is one of the things I've learned. Like, it cannot be led by HR. It has to be led by the top. If your CEO isn't driving this, and if your board isn't driving this, and your chairman, like, I'm often having conversations, every time I'm in New York, I'm like, to our chairman, can we have a chat? And I love chatting to members of our board, and, and they really care, they get, you wouldn't bring me in an organization if you didn't want to care. You just, like, because I am not the process, and that they brought me in because of, how I look after people, like
wellness. You in because of who you are as a person.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, if you don't have a CEO that is, like, even if they haven't got it, but are not open to it, it's not going to work. Because our employees want it led by the executive and CEO. They don't want it led just by
Yeah. Do you see any shifts in how employees kind of perceive, or how their expectations have changed over time in terms of what they expect from their workplace?
Oh, I think they accept a lot of care. I think now that, I mean, you think what people are dealing with COVID, like, oh my God, they're working from home, they're looking after their kids if they've got kids. Some of them are alone and not, I'm far away from my family. My boss is always like, Mike's always like, Kelly, work from where you want. Like, go and work from Australia for 3 months, be with your family. Like, I'm so lucky I have flexibility everywhere. And he knows that I'm a traveler. So he's like, work from wherever you want. Like, I work crazy hours anyway. It doesn't really matter. And I think you need flexibility. I
Yeah.
think my big drive at the moment is not one size fits all. There is not one size fits all.
Mm.
That's in learning, development, working hours, working styles, wellness programs, like the way we work. Like, there is not one. Everyone is a unique individual. Like, benefits. Someone wants a gym pass. Someone wants mental health apps. Someone wants a new desk for their office.
Mm.
Like, treat everyone individually. We're
Mm.
all individuals. We
Yeah.
can't be marked all the same.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's
Like that, I
interesting.
think that's where we fall down, and I think that is the way of the world. It's almost like choose your own adventure. And I could not work a 9 to 5 job, like just in an office every day. Like, that just wouldn't work for me. Like, I do a lot of my meetings in the morning, like walking. So I live in Hampstead Heath in London,
Yeah.
and I'm there, or I'll go to Primrose Hill or Regent's Park. I'm very lucky. I live near greenery,
Yeah.
but I'm very lucky, you know.
Yeah.
But that's not for everyone, because we've got a whole lot of customer service and operations people that need to be on the phones, need to be with clients, and I commend them, and so everyone is different, but that's just, I know myself, and I think you need self-awareness too, that you've
Absolutely.
got to
Yeah.
know. And I think,
Yeah.
you've got to know your people, and you've got to know your people. Like, that's amazing. Like, know your people, understand what drives them, motivates them, frustrates them, oppresses them, whatever. Not oppresses, but frustrates them. We don't oppress our people, but I mean, what is making them, tick?
What
What
makes them
is
tick? Yeah.
actually
Yeah.
going? What's going to block them?
It was interesting what you said about needs. Part of the research that I did for my master's dissertation was around this idea of needs satisfaction. And it ties in very well with what you're saying about each person is unique, but it's about understanding and having that self-awareness, as you were talking about as well, of like knowing what your own needs are, but then managers and leaders having the capability to have those conversations with employees to talk about what their needs are and to kind of get a real understanding of, flexibility might suit one person, but like you say, the gym pass then might be nice for someone else as a reward or as some sort of recognition or something like that. So I thought that
Yeah.
was
But then
interesting.
it also ties into courage. Like, you might know your need, but you might not have the courage to voice that need. And
Yeah.
so I coach a lot of people in how to have that voice. And I think that's a really important thing. The people sometimes, so one is a self-awareness, and then the courage, or make sure that that is being heard. And
Yeah.
again, whether it's, and making sure managers can have those conversations around it. People are scared, you don't know their past experiences. You don't know when they've been knocked down in the past, or
Yeah.
like, it's a very interesting dynamic, and you
So
need
true.
someone that really cares and gets into their
Yeah.
what motivates them, what drives them,
Yeah.
and then giving them the voice to be heard.
And
And
how,
then to know if that it's if it's a no, it doesn't mean that it's always going to be a no. Like,
yeah.
there's so many little factors that lead into all of this. Humans are we're complex.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. We're not just like robots. Do you have any kind of tips in terms of finding that courage, whether that's for managers to have the conversations or for employees to find that courage to talk about what their needs are, or even around gaining that self-awareness in the first place to know what their needs are or to know what really drives them?
I think finding a mentor or a coach or something really
Yeah.
helps. Like, it
Okay.
helps when I'm mentoring and coaching, like, you see these people, they just lack sometimes confidence to have it. And then you see the changes and they get really excited. Like,
Yeah.
I got a text today with someone I'm coaching, and they're like, Kelly, I asked my manager this, and they said, for sure, like, have you thought of this? And you could see she was like gleaming. Like, every time I speak to her, like, she wants to say it, so you find it for her and you encourage, and then I'm like, okay, tell me what happened then, and you know it's going to be okay, because I know who her manager is. It's going to be fine. But imagine she was just sitting there for months without having that voice, even though she knew what she wanted. And I think it helps because I'm role modeling a lot of, you know, people like, okay, I'm going to go work abroad. Can I do that, Kel? I'm like, yeah, you can, of course. So, you know, and I'm not a good role model for life balance. Like, I'm always on. And this week was the first time I actually put a do not disturb. And Michael's like, I love that, because it's showing other people, like, I need to role model what I'm telling everyone else. I'm going to have a social, you know, I'm having a disconnect day tomorrow because I'm working here, but tomorrow I'm going on a tropical island and I'm so excited. And I'm not going to take my, you know, I'm not going to do my Slack. I'm not going to answer emails. It's going to be my day. And so I'm learning that for the first time, you know?
Yeah. No, it's brilliant about being able to it's really about demonstrating the behaviors that you expect of other people as well. So if you expect other people not to be available all the time, or you want to demonstrate that it's okay to not be switched on 24/7, then it's really great that you've, like you say, role models that behavior within the organization as well.
Yeah. And then you need to call people up if they're not role modeling it, because it has to be others. And like I said, I'm not a great role model for that type of stuff because I'm always on. But that means because sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night and I want to do stuff, you know, we're a global org. Yeah, so it's interesting.
Yeah, definitely. No, you're right. And it does, like, so good behavior needs to be rewarded, but bad behavior, you need to have those conversations as well if it's not role model that you would expect in the organization. You mentioned kind of at the start of our conversation about data and the importance of using data and how you're not great at stats, but you're able to get some metrics around that. How much does that form part of what you do, or part of HR's role at the moment, do you think?
You need data to back up your decisions and to back up the initiatives. So we've just rolled out an employee engagement survey because we're just assuming stuff, you know. You've got to ask, like, you know, the return to work, we put out a survey because we want to know, do people want to go back to the office? Do they not? Do they want to work from home? Like, how do we prepare? So everything has to be driven by data, you know. And I actually like, you know, I like looking at data a lot, but you know, if you don't have data, you're not using, you're basing your decisions based on gut instinct alone, and that is not going to back up, you know. And then you could be driving initiatives that don't even make sense, and then sometimes the data that you get, people change their mind afterwards anyway.
This is it. Yeah, we're human.
We're going to change your mind later. I want to go to the office today. No, actually I want to work from home now, you know. And the world is changing so rapidly that you totally need data.
I think if you make a decision and then you kind of live with that decision maybe for 3, 4, 5, 6 months, something like that, and then you're like, okay, I'm not really sure if this is working for me anymore, or this blended approach of sometimes in the office, sometimes at home is not really working anymore, then it makes sense to survey again and sort of see where people are at. But
exactly.
I'm big into data. My background is all around data analytics, and I've just done the master's which was very research heavy, quant based stuff. So I love all of that kind of thing, especially when it comes to employee engagement and satisfaction and that sort of stuff as well. So it's great to see that HR are starting to use more and more data in decision making as well.
Sure, perfect.
Was there anything else that you wanted to talk about in relation to this kind of caring nature, or any practical tips that you have for people to create that kind of environment in their own workplaces?
Check in on people, like make sure you're having conversations, make sure you make the time to check in on every new starter that you know. I have meetings with every new starter now. I've random meetings with different people, get their opinions. Like, don't, you know, I think, well, I've never done this, but you know, all the initiatives that we drive are coming from our people. They're not coming from me and P&C. I can help facilitate, I can give ideas, but they're coming from them. So I think, as I said, and make sure it's like part of your recruitment process, get to know the people. Like, it's not just about the skills and that. Like, part of your management training, there has to be, we do a whole lot on empathy, emotional intelligence, like wellness, like, you know, make sure you're having conversations with people to know what they're going through and drive support for them. You know, we have a lot of stuff around wellness in terms of insomnia workshops, depression, anxiety. Yeah.
I like this whole idea. So I always think that if you're doing any sort of consulting or any sort of change, the answers are usually found in the room itself. So people already have the answers, and whether or not they've shared those answers up to now is, maybe they haven't. But certainly, if you ask people in a room what needs to change or what can we
Then
do differently or what can we do better, they will tell you.
exactly, I agree. They will tell you,
Rather
but
than,
not always. Not always. Yeah, depends. Again, different cultures are not going to be as honest. So you've
yeah,
got to. I think part of caring is understand your workforce. Understand we've got like 12 different locations, like 33 nationalities. Not everyone is the same. Not everyone is going to speak up. Not everyone is going to challenge.
yeah,
And so you've got to find ways to elicit information from all of that.
yeah,
But it
yeah.
goes back to the core thing: know your workforce, know
Yes.
your people. You know.
Know your workforce, but create that environment where they feel safe. So this idea of psychological safety, that they feel safe to share how they're feeling, to share what they're doing, to share what it is that they need. And kind of circling back to what you were talking about then, the coaching and the mentoring. So helping managers to be able to facilitate those types of conversations, to really get to the heart of like, what is it that people need at work?
Yeah, true.
Brilliant. That's great. So the question I ask everyone who comes on the podcast, Kelly, what
Sure.
makes you happier at work?
Just being myself. Like if I can be myself and I don't have to pretend and I don't have to wear a mask, not literally speaking. But yeah, that makes me happier. Flexibility for me, because I am, I'm a bit of a gypsy. I like to have multiple things going and I like to make an impact and difference. So yeah, and working around incredible people.
Yeah, brilliant. So being yourself, bringing your full authentic self, and being surrounded by people who are equally great.
Yes, that's it.
Brilliant. And if people want to reach out and get in touch with you, what's the best way that they can do that?
Yeah, they can email me, kelly.hartman@flywire.com, or on LinkedIn, Kelly Hartman, Flywire.
Brilliant.
Yeah, anyone, happy to talk to anyone, chat to anyone, have a virtual coffee. If they're in London, I can have a real coffee if they don't mind. It's up to them. Everyone's very different. So I'm respectful of that. When I get back to London, if I get back to London.
Yeah, this is it.
I'm looking out the window and thinking, do I want to go back to London?
Yeah, 27 degrees where you are versus I don't know how many degrees it is in Dublin at the moment, but
Yeah, I don't.
27.
Wow.
Right. Do you have any other kind of tips that you'd like to share, or do you want to talk about Flywire and what you do as a business, if people want to know a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so Flywire is a payments business. We help people with their most important payments. So whether it's healthcare, hospitals, students, going to uni, or travel, which is my big passion.
Yes.
So yeah, we're Boston headquartered company. About 515 people, 12 different locations around the world. We've been so it is a fintech company. And when I started, there was 200. Now there's about 515. Wow. So we're growing rapidly all the time.
Wow, brilliant.